Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the NOAA Implementation Year Kickoff content. We are excited to bring this recording to you all for use at your own computers and regular revisiting should you continue to have more questions about the initial Phase 1 implementation year for BAS. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So thank you all again very much for bearing with us as we record. It was not our original plan to record this session, but we appreciate those that were patient with us at the initial kickoff. We did have some significant technical difficulties, and we are working through some analysis for that and ways to correct that in the future. We did not want to wait to make sure that we got you this information, since the initial implementation year for BAS does start on the 1st of October 2021, which, as you know, is behind us. So we want to make sure that we are able to provide you this information about your implementation, the activities that are coming up over the next year, and ways in which you and your teams can be involved. So as you watch this, please feel free to pause it or fast forward and replay it as much as you like. It is yours to use and have this information as well. The slide deck that we are presenting today is also available on our website, so you guys can access that really as long as you would like to in the future. Following up from this session, we are going to have a live Q&A session. We know that one of the downsides to recording the event is we don't get to interact with you all throughout the course of this presentation. So please be on the lookout for an upcoming invite on your calendars as you review this recording and listen to the content and the information. Write down your questions, submit those to us in advance, and join us for that live Q&A so we can talk more about the implementation year, hear your questions, and respond to those as if we were meeting in person in a live session. And then, as always, we have so much information available for you all on both our website and our portal, so we encourage everybody to continue to visit those sites and pull down documentation and information as you need to throughout the course of this implementation. Next slide, please. So you're going to hear from a lot of us today. We're going to talk through all of our work streams as you see on slide 3. I'm providing our overview today for you, but you'll hear from our core applications team, our data warehouse folks, our technical group, the organizational change management team, and then we'll round it out with discussions on risk and security. We really want to make sure that we walk through the entire implementation end to end, and that you hear, based on work stream, all of the activities and all the ways that you can get involved over the next several months. Next slide, please. So to start us off, I'm going to go through an implementation overview. Next slide, please, Kathy. Thank you. So our purpose today is to kick off and talk more about the activities that are coming in the next year. So before we do that, I just want to thank everyone who has had the opportunity to connect to our program in the past 18 months. We did award our contract back in April of 2020, and we have so enjoyed global design and common solution with you all in hearing about your processes and procedures and understanding your current business operations as it relates to the BAS systems. So thank you for all of your collaboration and feedback and effort as we've worked through the configuration settings for the past year and a half. As we open up the next year, the activities within our work streams do change a little bit to provide those preparation activities to help you guys prepare to deploy on the products on 10/1/2022. So this first phase implementation, you'll see a lot about NOAA, BIS, and EDA. NOAA is our primary finance provider that's going live in this phase. There are 2 customers that they support financially, are BIS and EDA. If you're joining us from those communities, you all will go live as well on 10/1/2022. And then lastly, we do have some folks in our Enterprise Services Acquisitions Office that provide acquisition services for BIS and EDA. And that group will go live with us as well. So we start this year on 10/1/2021, and all of that solution suite and those customers will go live a year from now in 2022. So what can you expect over the next year? That is the goal of this presentation, is to take it by work stream and look at a who, what, where, when, and why approach to the implementation. So who needs to participate in any given activity? We're going to talk about the details of the activities, the goals and the aims, and what the expectations are, so that you and your bureaus have a chance to understand who would need to come and participate in those. What are the logistical details and where will it be taking place? We want to make sure that there are no questions about invites or process or procedures. We're going to be clear and provide some details for what the activities are meant to accomplish and how you can connect to those. The where is a little bit kludgy, obviously. During COVID, the majority of our activities will still be conducted remotely, but we want to make sure that you know where you can go to access that event information and connect to those meeting invites. When will it be taking place? We're going to provide a lot more schedule information over the next few slides to make sure that you know when over the course of your year to plan out for these activities, in addition to the level of effort that will be required to conduct these activities. So in the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about where in the calendar the activities lie and then what, again, that level of effort will be for those that are participating. And then lastly, but certainly not least, we want folks to understand why we're undertaking these activities. What are the goals? How does that fit into a larger successful implementation for BAS? We think that's an important aspect of this journey and want to make sure that you all are aware of why we're choosing to undertake these activities and how they're going to fit into our larger success. Next slide, please. So as a quick reminder, when the initial implementation phase 1 goes live in October of 2022, the entire BAS solution suite will go live. So if you currently reside in NOAA, EDA, BIS, or Enterprise Services, and 10/1/2022 hits, the Oracle EBS solution will be live for the finance community. The Prism product will go live for the acquisitions community. For the property community, while you are still using Sunflower today and you will be using it in the future, you will go live on the BAS solution of Sunflower. It's the same product, but you'll go live in the BAS solution of that 10/1/2022 as well. In addition to those 3 core applications, you'll be able to access those via the single sign-on portal with ServiceNow. That'll be where you go to log into your applications, access your knowledge base and find answers. And that's also going to be where you go to enter any help desk tickets that you might have while using the application. And then lastly, the Enterprise Data Warehouse will also be going live on 10/1/2022, as will the Tableau report writing tool that sits on top of the data warehouse to, again, promote business intelligence and reporting for that application. So what I just talked about here on slide 7 is our overall program timeline, and the black arrow kind of shows you where we are in the calendar. We're just closing out Q4 of FY21, opening Q1 of FY22. So the orange bar right in the center of your screen represents the implementation activities for phase 1 for NOAA, BIS, EDA, and Enterprise Services. Once we close out that implementation year, we'll open up our NIST phase 2 year, and then NIST will have all the way through FY23. And then once we get to FY24, census is the final implementation. So one of the things that you'll see in this slide deck, as I mentioned, is the activities that we did for global design and common solution. Those are going to shift to be a little more user-centric as we get into configuration validation, testing, and training for the final applications prior to deployment. Next slide, please. So this is a focused in viewpoint of the implementation year timeline specifically. So on slide 7, we talked about that orange bar in the center. This is zooming in on that orange bar for the specific activities that are coming for phase 1. The big 3 that we want to highlight for right now are at the top of the slide. That's conference room pilot, user acceptance testing, UAT, and then training delivery. Those are the 3 primary activities that you and your users and your employees are going to be interacting with the program on. So for conference room pilots, that's going to be your first ability to look at a viable product of all of your core applications. So as we close out our consensus conversations from global design and common solution, we're building out those configuration settings within the environment, and CRPs is going to be your first chance to review that product and make an assessment along with the BAS PMO of how those configuration settings support the overall business result. So we're going to be looking at the outcomes of our processes to see if the viable product that we are testing during CRP can meet those business results and outcomes. The next activity and the next iteration of that environment will be user acceptance testing. So we're going to validate our environment as an outcome of CRP, open up our testing activity, and test throughout the Q3 and early Q4 timeframe. And then lastly, during Q4, that's going to be our training delivery. So you're going to hear a lot more about these activities, but during that Q4 timeframe, that's when your users will be able to go into our training classes, learn more about the program, and be able to do some hands-on style activities in the training environment prior to go live at the end of FY22. While those activities are taking place, we're continuing to set up and convert data into the environments to support our deployment. So the blue bar you see in the center of your screen, that's where we're going to make sure all of the BAS solution components are integrated together. So Oracle, Prism, and Sunflower, making sure those three systems are tightly integrated. And then we're also setting up integration points to DOC common systems. So things like your E2 travel system, your SmartPay 3 credit card system, will make sure those are integrated, as well as bureau-specific integration points. In our green bar, you'll see information for our conversion. So we are already working with a lot of your program teams on talking through what the rules are going to be for conversion, what data sets are going to be brought over into your new environments. But this green bar represents that iterative work towards converting the data into production. So we've got 3 mock conversions planned for the entire phase 1 implementation year, and that green bar represents that iterative conversion validation style lifecycle. In the bottom part of this timeline slide, we've got our security assessment to receive our final ATO prior to going live with this set of products, and that's happening in the Q3, Q4 timeframe of next fiscal year. And then all the while, we'll be loading in and building report writing capability in the EDW. So we're finalizing our assessment now of what reports are going to be available in the core application and what reports are going to be available in the EDW. And then as we move through the implementation year, we'll continue building those stories and building out the report writing capability in the tool. So again, in the next few slides, you're going to hear a lot more information about these work streams. You're going to get into more detail about these timeframes and these activities. But at a high level, this is what the implementation timeframe will look like and the buckets of activities that are coming in the next calendar year. Next slide, please. So slides 9 and 10 break up those buckets that I just talked about and really present an assessment of the level of effort that will be needed from our bureau customers during this time. So as these slides continue and as you hear from our functional points of contact, for instance, talk about conference room pilots, slides 9 and 10 are really here to give you an assessment of the level of time in which you'll be spending as part of that activity. So I'm going to talk through this slide in a fair amount of detail, just so you kind of understand how it's put together. And then please feel free to use this slide and the next slide as a reference back as you walk through this material and find out where your activities are going to be for phase 1 and how much time those activities will take. So on the top section, we have our functional work stream. Our 2 primary buckets of activity for functional is our conference room pilot and our user acceptance testing. So our CRP participants are those folks that are going to be going to the conference room pilot session, participating in the activity and validating those results. So those are a pretty high level of effort during that time frame. So we've got greater than 7 hours per week for those 3 level of efforts. And then that time frame is November, December, and January. The second bucket of functionality for that work stream is the user acceptance testing. So for those folks that are identified as participants for UAT, you'll see that that level of effort is concentrated in the July and August timeframe. It is still greater than 7 hours per week, but testing and conference room pilots are separated as activities as a recognition that the same resources might be involved in both activities. Moving into Enterprise Data Warehouse, 3 primary activities here. We've got our overall user acceptance testing approach and selecting those testers, reviewing the reports and the user stories, and then lastly, validating those reports as part of a testing activity. So 3 level of efforts for EDW as you get into those slides. So our overall approach is a low level of effort for the January, February, and March timeframe. For the folks that'll be reviewing user stories during that time frame, an identified set of participants from the Bureau, that goes up to about a medium level of effort at 4 to 6 hours per week. And then lastly, in user acceptance testing to validate those reports, in the July, August, September, that then moves to a high level of effort of greater than 7 hours per week. Going down into OCM, and again, you're going to hear more about these activities as we get into these slides, but we have a set of activities for our change network. These are folks that have been identified at the Bureau level to help us with communications and training and information dissemination throughout the course of the implementation. As you can see, this group is involved from now in October all the way through the September timeframe at a low level of effort of less than 3 hours a week. As we move into that Bureau user role selection, there's a group of folks at the program level that are assisting in selecting our users and mapping those users to the appropriate role. That work is concentrated in the November, December, January timeframe, and that's a medium level of effort for user role selection. Access verification will happen for all of our users. Prior to going live, we want to make sure that as you access the new application, you've got the appropriate role and the appropriate permissions to conduct your job. So from April all the way through September prior to go live, we're going to be asking users to assist in validation of their roles and access in the product. Very low level of effort throughout the course of that time. We just want to make sure we've set aside enough months to get through our whole user population. As we get into training, development, and delivery, a couple of nuances here related to the population that we're having for both of these activities. We've got a couple of folks that are coming over from our NOAA group as details to assist us in developing that training content. For those details that are NOAA trainers, for our additional training staff internally, it's a high level of effort from October to June as we develop the training program materials, provide that content, build out the logistics for how people can sign up for training. It's a high level of effort during that time. The majority of our user population are not going to be involved in that planning activity, but rather will go to the bottom line in the execution of training. So if you're a user that needs to go to a class, this bottom line is meant for you. It is July, August, and September, and it represents a high level of effort because you can go to as many classes as you would like. We're going to cap the number of attendees per class, but all the classes are going to be open. If you need to attend a couple of different sessions in order to feel comfortable, that will be available to you throughout July, August, and September. Next slide, please. And then lastly, for our level of effort has to do with our technical architecture and setup of our products. So we're working very closely, and you'll hear about this in a few slides, on setting up that integration functionality for the BAS system and the associated feeder systems that we're connecting to throughout the department. As we work through that integration and we have detailed level discussions and we begin to set up that work, for the integration points of contact, it's a low level of effort from now in October all the way through the June timeframe. And this shows that those integration points will be set up and running prior to our user acceptance testing timeframe. As we get into the NOAA data extraction and we look at data conversion from our existing databases into our future state products, this line shows that folks that are working with us on data conversion and data validation from November all the way to June, it's a medium level of effort, 4 to 6 hours per week during that time frame. And then lastly, for conversion review, there'll be a group of folks that will be assisting in data validation after that last conversion prior to deployment. That's what this last line shows. For any points of contact that are involved in that final data validation, it's a pretty high level of effort from the July timeframe into the August timeframe. So again, you're going to hear a lot more about these activities throughout the next many slides in this presentation and from our leads across the BAS PMO. I encourage you, as you hear their content and hear more about these activities that are in that second column, that you refer back to slides 9 and 10 if you have a question of how much time is this really going to take? What are the types of activities I'll be doing, and what level of effort can I expect to expend? That's what slides 9 and 10 will be a guide for you all to revisit as you continue working through the content. Next slide. All right, so thank you all so much. I'm now going to hand it over to Pat Grimes. She is the functional project manager for the BAS effort, and she'll be walking you through some of our activities for the core applications over the next year. So Pat, over to you.
All right, thank you, Lindsay. Appreciate that. We can go ahead and get started with the next slide. So as you can see here, our core applications objective is to validate the 2B business processes within BAS. With that in mind, let's walk through the high-level timeline starting at the top of the chart here. During the entirety of FY21, we've conducted Common Solutions sessions with Bureau representatives to determine the 2B configurations to meet DOC requirements across the EBS, PRISM, and Sunflower applications. Looking forward over the course of FY22, we have several critical activities that will occur. So in Q1, the BAS team will be doing CRP prep, which will be finalizing the system configurations and staging business scenarios. Our CRP sessions will begin in mid-November and run through January. For Q2, we'll conduct our final CRP sessions and conduct our CRP closure activities. In Q2 and Q3 will be system integration testing, which Mark will discuss in more detail when we get to his section a little later. And then in Q3, Q4, we'll be conducting user acceptance testing. So with that, we can get into a little more detail about CRP and UAT in the next few slides. All right, so first of all, what is CRP? It's a critical opportunity for the key SMEs and business owners to review the initial configuration of the BAS software to confirm the 2B business cases and process flows. So our general approach to the CRP sessions, first of all, we're coming out of Common Solution. We have several outputs or exit criteria, as we've called it, that form the foundation for the CRP. DOC requirements were validated through those Common Solution sessions, and that has led to our recommended system configuration that we'll be seeing during these CRP sessions. During the CRP sessions, the BAS team will provide a guided and very detailed walkthrough of the standard business scenarios for key SMEs and business owners to review the initial configurations to confirm the 2B business cases and process flows. Our CRP participants will view the 2B systems, including supporting configuration and RICE-W components, and will be asked to provide feedback in real time. And you can see at the bottom of the slide here what RICE-W stands for. It's reports, interfaces, conversion, and enhancements or extensions and workflow. Our CRP sessions will include, as Lindsay mentioned, EBS, PRISM, and Sunflower. And the high-level CRP schedule has been provided out to our Bureau stakeholders, and more detailed schedule will be provided very soon. And then in November, we'll be scheduling a separate meeting to get into much more details regarding those CRP sessions and what they'll look like and what to expect. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about our CRP timeline and logistics. So as you can see here, we have 4 key activities. We're just coming out of Common Solutions, and that completed on 9/30/21. We have CRP prep, which began already on 10/1 and runs through 12/31. We have CRP execution. Those activities will begin on November 15th, and they run through the end of January. And then CRP closure activities will be the entirety of February, so 2/1 through 2/28/22. So let's run through a few of the logistics for our CRP sessions. So first of all, we'll have individual sessions which align to our different business functions. Unlike Common Solution, we will have no overlapping CRP sessions, so folks will be able to join the sessions that are relevant to them without worrying about other sessions that might be conducted at the same time. We'll have specific users who will be invited to sessions that are aligned to their day-to-day roles. And at a high level, we have November, which will cover our PRISM activities. December will cover our system administrator duties, and January will be dedicated to all things financial and asset management. And then a typical session for a CRP session, they will run from 9 to 4 each day. We'll have two 15-minute breaks and an hour for lunch, which you can see here on the slide. All right, next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about our CRP process. So first of all, again, as I mentioned earlier, our objective is to use our SME feedback to help validate the DOC 2B business processes to confirm the configuration baseline 3.0. So for some context here, baselines 1.0, which has been finalized, and 2.0, which is currently in process, are locked-in foundational system configurations. An example of a baseline 1.0 configuration is the new BAS accounting code structure, as an example. So looking now at the process flow diagram, starting with number 1, this shows where a meeting facilitator will guide the CRP attendees through standard business scenarios and will bring up key discussion points in a step-by-step fashion. Number 2, our SMEs will provide in real-time feedback on process flows and configurations. And on step 3, our SMEs will provide pass or fail feedback on that process flow. So in that decision block, you can see we have two paths here. So one is for past feedback, which means the business process is confirmed and becomes part of that baseline 3.0 configuration and moves forward into system and integration testing. If, however, a business process is not validated, that failure will be addressed outside of that CRP session and will then move forward into system integration testing. So next slide, please. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about our CRP sessions and your involvement. So what we're asking for our participants, first of all, the responsibilities of our participants is that they remain engaged throughout the session, that they contribute their business knowledge and provide input to confirm that 2B business process, that they work collaboratively towards that standardization of the business process, continuing the drive to a single instance, single configuration. They assess the fit of the standard business process for the 2B BAS solution, and they provide feedback directly in the CRP exit criteria in real time. So our expectations of our participants is that they confirm their availability for the scheduled sessions and that they confirm that or they complete the CRP exit criteria after each session. So again, our schedule indicator here shows greater than 7 hours per week for each participant. And again, we've covered this on a previous slide, but as a reminder, those sessions will begin in mid-November. They'll be conducted, 9 to 4 with those two 15-minute breaks and an hour for lunch. And we still have a high level, we've provided that high level schedule, but we are working on the more detailed schedule, and that should be coming out very soon. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so now switching gears to user acceptance testing, which, as Lindsay mentioned earlier, begins in May of 2022. The objective here is that NOAA users will complete user acceptance testing test scripts to validate and approve the expected business processes. So we'll talk through a few high-level details here. Today, more detail will be coming in the future as we get closer to UAT timeframe. But for today, we'll talk about our participants will be aligned to specific UAT test scripts based on their role in the 2B production environment. Standard business processes will be utilized. We'll have individual test scripts with NOAA-specific data. We'll be focused on the 2B or day-to-day business processes. It will be representative of the 2B NOAA converted data. It will not be a full data set at that point. We'll have our RaceW components will be included for that end-to-end testing. Users will access the system and execute independent test scripts, and we'll have UAT exit criteria will align with those go-live preparation activities. So again, more detail to come in the future here on UAT, but did want to provide that as some high-level information today. And that covers it for our core apps activity. So I'll turn this over to Corey now, who will talk through all things Enterprise Data Warehouse.
Great. Thanks so much, Pat. Like Pat mentioned, my name's Corey Wendell. I'll be giving the EDW update today. So on slide 19, you will see our key objectives and overall timeline. Our first objective is to develop the integrated reporting data model, which will join data from the BAS core applications along with data from the travel and HR administrative systems to support enterprise and ad hoc reporting. Our second objective is to develop EDW enterprise reports that will support common reporting needs across the department and bureaus. Moving into the timeline, starting in the center on the left, throughout FY21, we focused on our requirements grooming activities where we identified data and reporting needs across the various administrative areas, such as HR, travel, and acquisitions. In addition, we also developed the initial ingest of travel and HR data into the EDW. Moving into FY22, in that longer blue bar there in the center, we'll be continuing to ingest core application data into the EDW, and then we'll shift our focus to designing, developing, and testing our integrated reporting data model. So again, that's the underlying data foundation that joins BAS data with the other administrative applications and is the source from which our EDW enterprise reports will pull. One quick thing to point out about the integrated data model, there is some dependence on external systems integrating with the BAS environment and also in some cases making changes to their applications in support of BAS. One of those things is ACS changes that Mark Del Grande will talk about in the next section. That top gray bar in the timeline is reflective of that dependence. Moving to the third line there in the center of the timeline. So in 22, we also have a number of reports, planning, and communication activities in Q1. Lindsay has mentioned our reporting outcomes discussions where we'll be telling you what reports will be available in the EDW and which release they'll be available in. In Q2, we'll be reviewing report user stories or requirements for those EDW reports identified for our initial release. And then Q3 and Q4 are reserved for development and testing of those EDW enterprise reports along with our Tableau tool configuration as well as user acceptance test. And all of that leads up to our EDW initial release, which coincides with the BAS Phase 1 deployment. Last but not least on this timeline, underneath that gray dotted bar is our historical data copy. And we'll talk about that piece in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. Great. So on slide 20, we have the data model and report development approach details. On the left-hand side, you'll see our reporting overview, and then that graphic in the center kind of outlines the approach that we've been taking in FY21, and we will take in 22 to work with you to get there. So from a reporting perspective, EDW enterprise reports will be developed and provided in incremental releases with more robust reports being developed over time. These EDW enterprise reports will be available for EDW users to generate in our Tableau tool, subject to role-based access controls. And again, these are going to support common processes and functions across the department. So staff funds is a good example of what an EDW enterprise report could be. We'll continue to identify EDW reporting needs and requirements across all of our bureaus. And this is so we can achieve that single standard DOC-wide set of reporting and analytics capabilities. We'll be designing our reports using features and drill downs, et cetera, to streamline our user experience. And then we'll also be restricting access to data and reports by organization and role. In addition to the EDW enterprise reports that will be available in the Tableau tool, some users will have the ability to create ad hoc reports using Tableau's drag and drop capability, similar to what many of you may be used to using Discover and Mars. We are going to talk more about what that looks like in our update in FY22 Q1. Moving on to the graphic in the upper left, This is our requirements grooming activities, where we worked with Bureau SMEs across the administrative areas to obtain insights into reporting and data needs through both our EDW and core application standard reports data calls. We utilize this information in the lower left box to analyze all of your data call responses, identify common reporting needs, and then determine which BAS application will support that reporting need, whether it's a BAS core application or the EDW. And as Lindsay mentioned, this update will be part of our FY22 reporting outcomes update in the next month or so. And the last bullet in this box basically just reflects the applications for which we've ingested data into the EDW to date. Moving to the right in the bottom right corner, this box reflects the development and testing work related to the initial ingestion of data into the EDW, developing our integrated reporting data model and our EDW enterprise reports, along with the Tableau configuration and role-based access controls. And then rounding it out in the top right, this is where I'll be working with NOAA, BIS, and EDA SMEs to validate our report user stories, go through UAT, which will coordinate with our core applications team to make sure that we're able to show you that end-to-end data flow and the results in the EDW reports. And then we'll also be providing our data dictionary and data model to what we are now calling EDW ad hoc users. You will have previously seen this called EDW power users. Next slide, please. On slide 21, this is where we're showing a little bit more detail related to level of effort and user involvement. The first bar here in the table is more BAS EDW team actions for some of those planning and communication related activities that we'll be doing in Q1. Key ones to note here is, again, our reporting outcomes update. And also we'll be talking to you all about our approach for identifying program manager reporting needs. During this time frame, we'll also be developing our UAT approach. And we will also be sharing with you our approach for EDW enterprise report development and our operating and governance model going forward. So how we'll work across the bureaus to identify and prioritize reports for subsequent EDW releases. The next three lines are bureau involvement tasks. And these are really in support of learning more about our UAT approach, providing participants to support UAT activities, and also reviewing our report user stories, which again are requirements in the Agile methodology. The next two lines are related to development and testing, as well as UAT for our EDW enterprise reports. And then that last line is, again, just sharing the data model, data dictionary. One piece on the data model and data dictionary is, while those will be provided in Q4 to our ad hoc users, we do anticipate providing an update on our integrated data model in Q2, along with an interim state data model to select bureau participants within the Q1 timeframe. And just last thing I want to point out on this slide as it relates to LOEs. So we have a number of planning activities occurring in Q1. So we will be refining level of efforts as we move forward and make sure to communicate any changes to those as we go forward. Next slide, please. Slide 22 is our historical data copy approach. So in addition to having the BAS core application data, the EDW will also have a copy of historical data from the legacy financial acquisitions and property management applications. The data from the legacy systems will be copied in its original legacy system database structure along with data format. In Q1, we'll be working with NOAA, CBS, and C-suite system owners and admins, as well as other key staff to plan for this effort. So this includes identifying the scope of data to migrate and access controls, selecting our data migration method, developing the MOU, etc. And then tentatively in Q2, we'll be doing a test using a subset of data in the lower or non-production environments, and we'll refine this timeline once we're done with the planning activities. The production copy will occur in Q1 FY23. This is anticipated to take a little bit of time, over a couple of months, again, subject to refinement based on our data migration method. And same thing here, once we are complete with the planning activities, we'll go ahead and refine those LOEs so you all have a better picture of involvement as we move forward. So those are all the updates we have for the EDW workstream. I will go ahead and turn it over to Mark Del Grande for the technical update.
Thanks, Corey. Hello, everyone. Mark Del Grande, the Technical Project Manager on BAS. And on slide 24, we can see one of our primary objectives is to implement and operate the BAS infrastructure for systems that are connecting to BAS, and then also for users for the single sign-on connection. And on the timeline here, you can see our primary areas of focus over the next year will be around standard interfaces, application-specific interfaces, mock conversions, and then just in general network connectivity of systems connecting to BAS and for users. And then post-go live, we move into the hypercare for those bureaus that have deployed. And on the subsequent slides, we'll provide some additional details around these timelines and activities that are included in each of them. So on slide 25, we can see the next objective of designing, developing, and implementing the integration between BAS and external systems. And here we've listed out kind of two categories of overall integrations. On the right side, you can see application-specific integrations are really things that are enterprise-wide, things like Citibank, purchase card transactions, E2, CWT, travel transactions, PRISM transactions, things that are used across the enterprise, labor from NFC as well. And so those are interfaces that are being developed by the BAS team that will feed information from these systems into their appropriate spots in EBS, PRISM, or Sunflower. And so we're working with each of these systems to meet the BAS standard to implement that. On the left side, you can see the common inbound integration templates that we'll be using for the bureaus and other users to get information into EBS. These are the templates that we'll be meeting with NOAA over the next months to refine, ensure that we have the right data elements on those and that we understand how those systems will need to interact with EBS. And on the next slide, we can see a little more detail around the timeline of each of these. So as I mentioned, we're working with the enterprise systems in the lower half and the blue bar to make their updates and deploy the changes necessary. And we'll be working with each of them to do the BAS changes, and then with the goal of having that complete to move into system integration test in the Q3 timeline. In the top bar here, we're showing the ones that we'll be working with NOAA on to make sure that we coordinate with those feeder systems to get the BAS changes in place, things like seafood inspection, to make sure that they have the right information and we understand how that data can flow between the two systems. On the right side, on this slide, we're showing the changes that we are generally working with external systems and that we'll be working with NOAA to implement. And then these mainly consist around the changes associated with the BAS ACS string. So you can see in the chart, they're generally fairly specific to which system we're talking to. There are different data elements in each of these systems, but these things listed here at a high level are usually present in most of them. And that's project code. For BAS, that's changing from 7 digits to 10 digits, and then the task code is changing from 3 digits to 5 digits. So any system that contains that today would need to update to the new format with BAS by the time that we go live, and to be able to test these interfaces. The org code is also called out on here, going from 16 to 18, but in some cases the 18 is already in place. For instance, NFC already has 18-digit OR code, which is consistent with how we're implementing it for BAS by adding the bureau code up front. So those are the high-level timelines associated with these changes for integration, and we'll be working with NOAA over this next year to go through that process and make sure that we implement the changes that are necessary. So on the next slide, on 27, we move into the conversion workstream, and here the objective is to migrate data from legacy systems into BAS systems, and while we're doing that, to address whatever data issues we can as we go through this. And so in the chart in the middle here is showing the three mock conversions that we're be doing for BAS, and as we move from left to right, the focus switches from reference data, the reference data supporting the transactions, to more of the transactional verification as we go through this process. And that'd be true for the EBS conversions, the PRISM conversions as well. On the next slide, we get into the overall tasks that we'll be performing with conversion. And so this is a fairly standard conversion list of activities. So we'll be identifying, assessing data sources, defining and designing the migration, building the migration solution, going through those mocks that we just talked about, and then cutting over and go live. One part that we will be working closely with NOAA on is the on the right side in the first part, the cleaning up of data. So as we go through these mock conversions, identify any issues with either the CBS data, potentially the C-suite data that needs to be converted into PRISM. We'll work closely with our stakeholders to clean up whatever we can in advance of the production cutover. So on slide 29, we have an overview of the different conversion data sets. The top two apply really to any system that's being converted into BAS, and the last one is really specific to EBS. But the first are reference master data, so anything that's supporting a transaction from the employee standpoint, supplier information, customer information, that would fall into this category. Financial transaction data, anything that has essentially will ever have a GL impact falls into this category, and this includes any obligations, PO awards, AP invoices, agreements. You notice here in the middle bar, we mentioned any system, regardless of where it's coming from. So this includes things like E2, CWT. We know that we'll be working with CWT to transition any open travel document at the end of this year, for instance, to make sure that it's also converted into the BAS format, in addition to the systems that fall within the BAS umbrella, like EBS and PRISM. And the last line, the GL data, will be converting the financial data from the legacy CBS environment into the EBS environment and making sure that those balances tie out as part of that activity. So on the next slide, on slide 30, we get into a little more detail around the scope of the conversion. And really, if you could boil it down to probably the top three bullets here, the all current and active reference data, and this is an important one, the second one, all open financial transactions. So anything that has a remaining balance on it at the end of this year, and then will be converted into the BAS format. And then also at the end of this year, any final account balances as FY22 is closed out, those will be converted into the BAS format. And then anything supporting those transactions that's necessary to operate within the EBS PRISM Sunflower environment will be converted over. On the right side, we're just clarifying things that are not going to be converted are closed documents without a financial impact, and requisitions will not be. It's important to note that, as Corey mentioned in her section, although we're not converting everything into the BAS format, we will retain that legacy copy of those environments in the EDW in case we need to refer back to that data. On slide 31, we have a little more detail around some of the steps on the conversion activities that we'll be working with NOAA on, and that'll be, this slide is geared really a little more towards the CBS to EBS conversion, but it could be applicable to PRISM, the C-suite to PRISM as well. And in this case, 3, 4, and 5, you can see we'll deliver the extract scripts expect that the systems division would then generate the extracts and deliver them back to us. Steps 6 through 11, we'll work through those conversion programs, and each mock we will find things to refine or work with NOAA on, and then at the end of the day, we'll have step 12 of signing off for the converted document. And up front, we'll also be having some sessions with NOAA to review the business rules that we'll be applying to those open documents and make sure we've categorized things correctly and avoid any pitfalls down the road. Next, on slide 32, we'll move into a little overview of some of the O&M support components of BAS that bureaus can expect as we move forward. In the topic areas on the left, this really consists of the BAS portal, which would be the homepage for the BAS program. This is also where users will go to sign into these applications. The BAS ADM is the Accenture Architecture Development Methodology that we'll be following to implement architecture changes and designs. Next line is BAS ICAM and SSO solution. We're working closely with department's ICAM team and their NOAA support group to take advantage of that offering at Commerce, and that's how users will authenticate to these applications. The fourth line here, BAS is a poly-cloud environment, so we'll be using all of those environments to support these applications, and to get our ATO that the security team will go into a little more detail on. Also consists of the help desk that I'll cover a little more on the next slide, and then we have a dedicated BAS security group to monitor the security of all of our applications, as well as weigh in on designs that have security-related aspects to it. We'll be following the BAS SDLC throughout the project, and then also move into post-deployment BAS hypercare, which is increased support for end users for 3 months after they go live. So the next slide, slide 33, has a high-level overview of the BAMS, the BAS Application Management System, which is really made up of these 3 components here that you can see on the slide. This consists of the ServiceNow help desk. This is on the portal, the primary sign-in page for users. We'll also have a knowledge base posted to it. And then in the middle, the NICE in Contact software solution to track and monitor help desk tickets as they come in. And then on the right, our application monitoring solution, which will provide continuous monitoring of these applications and processes, integrate it with the ServiceNow predictive application monitoring tool to monitor performance, make predictive suggestions on what we might need to do to support these applications, and monitor the overall health of the BAS solution with that. So that's a high-level overview of the BAM system and the technical components of the BAS program. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andy Blumenthal to walk through the organizational change management information.
Thank you, Mark, so much. This is Andy Blumenthal, and I'm pleased to provide you with an overview of the organizational change management activities for the upcoming and exciting NOAA implementation year. Next slide, 35, please. So OCM is responsible for our user stakeholder readiness in transitioning to BAS. The OCM timeline includes the following major activities. First, in green, you'll see the change network. The change network is made up of change agents and change champions from across NOAA, BIS, EDA, and ESA, and they will help us to promote and assess change readiness and assist with all the communications over the course of the entire implementation year. Next, in orange, you'll see user access, and we will be working with the bureaus to provide BAS user access. And this includes role definition, which is already occurring now, to be followed by role selection, role provisioning, and role verification over the course of FY22. Third, in blue, you'll see training, and OCM is responsible for providing the knowledge and ability to use BAS, and this includes training development, train the trainer, and training delivery, as well as post-training assessment. Next slide, 36, please. So firstly, in terms of our change network, the objective is to ensure two-way communications and stakeholder readiness for the significant change that's coming to transition to BAS. Over the course of the implementation, the Change Network will assess and help address user needs, questions, concerns, feedback, and change readiness. The Change Network will essentially be the voice of the user. They will serve as a local community of experts and establish ongoing communications between the BAS PMO and the end user community that they represent. Finally, participants in the Change Network will have an opportunity to grow their expertise with BAS and thus be able to serve as an additional source of assistance to users throughout the implementation lifecycle. The Change Network is designated as a relatively low level of effort and generally will require less than a few hours per week by the change agents and champions and their associated user community. Specifically, the Change Network will help with user communications on the following types of activities over the course of the year. First, in FY22 in Q1 for the conference room pilots, the CRPs. In Q2 for role-based access control and training material development. In Q3 for preparation for UAT and training. And in Q4, feedback and readiness for BAS Go Live. And then continuing into FY23 in the early part of the year in Q1 and Q2, the Change Network will help answer user questions and continue to provide feedback on BAS production support or hypercare. In short, the Change Network will be here to help put you, the end user, at the center of the implementation, and the goal is to ensure that each of you is ready to confidently work with BAS for your day-to-day mission functions. Next slide, 37, please. This next slide describes the activities for BAS's role-based access control, RBAC, with the objective to provide all the users with system access based on their business needs. This activity is designated a medium level of effort by the bureaus in terms of their user role selection. Additionally, there will be a low level of effort for users in order to verify their BAS system's access later in the process. This function is broken down into the following four major components. First of all, on the upper left in red for role definition, in Q4 of FY21, this was where BAS OCM was defining user roles to the system and socializing these with their bureau management. On the right side, in green for role selection, in Q1 to 2Q of FY22 now, the bureau management will actually select the user roles for BAS users with the aid of documentation such as a roles matrix, separation of duties guidance, a data dictionary, as well as a CBS screen to EBS functional mapping. On the lower right, for user provisioning in gray, that will occur in Q3 and Q4 of this year, and BAS administrators will load the initial set of users and provide access to BAS for UAT, training, and production. In the future, new user role provisioning will occur through the BAS portal in ServiceNow. And finally, in the lower right, in blue, access verification. This will also occur later in the year in Q3 and Q4, and users will be able to go in and verify their access during UAT training and go live. We're still working on the many specifics for RBAC, and more information will be forthcoming over the course of the year. Next slide, 38, please. Okay. In terms of training, BAS OCM vendor and bureau trainers will provide the training on how to use the BAS system. Training is designated high in terms of level of effort, since it is a full-time commitment by the trainers, as well as for users during the BAS classes that they will be attending. In terms of schedule, the training program will be guided by the following activities and timeline. In January of FY22, we plan to onboard a number of bureau trainers, as well as initiate the onboarding of additional contractor trainers, and immediately begin to build their specific BAS knowledge. Then, in March to June of FY22, OCM will get the trainers ready to train their colleagues, to train you. During this time, trainers will have the opportunity to participate in a fundamentals of training class and in teach-back sessions in order to practice their skills in training BAS. In June of FY22, Very important, we plan to send out training enrollment notifications to all of you for BAS training, and that will occur through the Department of Commerce Learning Center through the CLC. The classes then in July through September, vendor and bureau trainers will actually be delivering the training to the user community, including both general navigation as well as specific functional training. And then finally, in October of FY23, we'll be evaluating the effectiveness of the training program, and we'll be working to refine training materials and make ongoing improvements as necessary. On the next slide, we'll be talking more about the details of the actual training. So slide 39. Training for BAS is going to be done in a structured and a deliberate fashion, similar to how we did training for real property rollout last April, but on a significantly larger scale. And it will include the following major training components in order to have high engagement with you, as well as aid in learning retention. First of all, on the lower left in blue, they're all in blue, as demos, users will learn the key concepts about how BAS works, and they'll see how their roles are performed in the new system. Then moving to the top, exercises, users will do practical exercises that give them an opportunity to apply what they learned within a training environment that mimics production. And finally, the lower right, reviews. There will be a review, and users can test their knowledge in order to help them further with learning retention. Next slide, 40, please. Finally, all the regular BAS OCM events and communications are planned to continue during the implementation year. First of all, events such as town halls, table talks, and office hours will be held with schedule adjustments to meet the busy implementation year schedule. Also, information products like our BAS newsletters, our Q&As, they'll continue to be published and posted to the BAS website, and other sensitive BAS information will continue to be posted to the CSC portal. You can also continue to reach out to us with any questions, as always, on the BAS website through the Submit a Question button, or by emailing us, as usual, at basproject@doc.gov. Now it is my pleasure to turn it over to Rakesh Raman, who's going to talk to you about our risk management approach for the NOAA implementation year. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. This is Rakesh Raman from the risk team. Next slide, please. So risk management is an ongoing process, so please continue to send me your risks and issues via the online form or the Excel document, both of which are available on the BAS website. So I will contact the owners and submitters for additional clarification and enter the risks and issues in the registers. So one thing to note, number of risks and issues will typically decrease as we approach go live. So that is a healthy sign. And the BAS leadership will be kept informed of all progress, and especially if key dates are impacted. So with that, I will turn it over to John Ford for an update on security. Thank you.
Thanks, Rakesh. This is John Ford. I am the Security Lead and Information System Security Officer for BAS. So starting on the next slide, we provided an overall timeline of security topics that will happen during the NOAA implementation schedule. Now, none of these items here in this timeline require specific NOAA tasks, NOAA users, or specific to NOAA at all. They're the similar process to what we would do for all of our bureaus. But we want to provide an overall list of items that will be occurring during this timeline, just in case you had any questions and for other situational awareness for you all. So on the next slide, we will go over each of these items. So first off is our continuous monitoring. This past August, we received the initial ATO for BAS, or Authority to Operate, that included 3 of the initial BAS cloud solutions that will be included in the overall solution. So for this continuous monitoring schedule, we will be reviewing the controls that were assessed and implemented for that initial ATO to ensure that the controls are operating as they are designed, and collecting evidence to ensure that they are meeting the required implementation statements. We will also be conducting our monthly vulnerability scanning activities and reporting. This will include scanning all the environment, providing reports to leadership, and remediating any vulnerabilities that are found, and working with our cloud service providers to ensure the responsibilities that they are responsible for are remediated as well. We will also continue to review and update our list of POAMs, which will outline any risks that are continuing on the system, which will outline the plan of action and milestones, which is that defines POAMs, and provide those to leadership for review and also for closure. We will also schedule our annual disaster recovery test and incident response test and train individuals that have key responsibilities within each of those programs. Next up, also during this timeline, we will be collecting additional control documentation for our new solutions that will be added during this time. So we will be updating our security documentation to include the following systems: Oracle Prism, EBS, IDM, Sunflower, etc., to make sure that we have documented all of those controls for our security packages for the next ATO. We will be also adding additional controls for new frameworks and overlays that will be required, that BAS will be required to meet, such as A123, high value asset overlay, privacy overlay, and the move to NIST revision 5. And then with that, we will also collect all the evidence required to show support for those controls, document it, and test them as well. Next up for BAS, additionally, for this during this time, we'll be completing the documentation to designate BAS as a HVA or high-value asset. Due to the nature of supported mission for BAS and the data contained within, BAS will need to be designated as a high-value asset or HVA. Per DOC, we will complete an HVA assessment tool that will outline the reasons why we have dictated BAS as an HVA and other requirements listed therein. We will submit that documentation to the CIO, also the authorizing official, and the system owner for overall approval, and we will begin required Department of Commerce and Department of Homeland Security required reporting. Lastly, we will be working on our privacy documentation. As BAS contains both PII and BII, we will have to document the data contained within, how the data is stored, the legal authority to collect that data, how it's protected, and how it's retained and deleted in the privacy threshold analysis and the privacy impact assessment. We will update those to include any new data, connections, and applications that would come with the NOAA implementation. We will also be reviewing the control assessment worksheet to ensure that all privacy overlay controls are implemented and any other controls that have to deal with protecting that data are operating effectively. So we can move on to the next slide. The tasks outlined in the previous slide were just security-specific tasks, but security does have responsibilities with other groups and other work streams that will be occurring during this time as well. For example, the first activity is ISAs, or interconnection security agreements. These govern the connections and data transfers between both internal and external parties. We are currently working on a number of ISAs with SAM, NSC, Treasury, E2, SmartPay 3, and also between BAS and the overall bureaus. Next up is the IDM or RBAC solution that we're working with TechArc and OCM. So we'll be supporting the implementation of the identity and access management solution for BAS and also the development of the role-based access control requirements. And we also assist with initial onboarding of NOAA users. Lastly, we are working with setting up a connection to ESOC, or the DOC Enterprise Security Operations Center. We are required to forward any logs and alerts to them for their ingestion and required analysis. So we are working with the TechArc team to set up the connection to start ingesting those logs. If you have any questions about any security topics listed here or outside of this, please feel free to contact the BAS security team directly at our mailbox below. With that, I will hand it back over to Lindsay to close it out.
Thank you, John, and thank you so much to all of our workstream leads who presented the information today, and thank you all for joining us in this recorded video of our BAS Implementation Year 1 kickoff. As a quick reminder, our upcoming live Q&A session is going to be scheduled shortly, so we'll be putting some information in the events section of our website, as well as communicating through your program teams on when that live session will be scheduled. So please join us there for any questions that you might have regarding today's content. You can also pre-submit questions. We'll provide a link out to that as well. There's also a way to ask a question in advance via our website, and you will always obviously be able to take yourself off of mute or utilize the chat during that live Q&A session in order to ask us a question real time. So thank you all so very much. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and thank you for joining us during this recording today. Thank you.